Hello and welcome to the Being Human podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Bottaro, and today I'm gonna open up something that I essentially just made up. I mean, not just made up, but I've been thinking about this for a while, and so I've sort of created a construct and how to think about something that has come from years of working with people and finding that there's a gap a bit in discussing something that everybody has an experience of, but in very different ways. And the thing I'm talking about now is anxiety. But anxiety is a really abstract word. It's a really generalizable term that gets thrown around in so many different ways. And I find that pretty much everybody has some level of anxiety, and there's different kinds of anxiety. But we don't really have language to talk about that. Now, I was thinking about that in terms of another word that we throw around a lot, for which we also don't have, or at least used to not have, really good language to work with. And that word is love. So as I was putting these ideas together and thinking about this, I thought about how amazing the book by Gary Chapman is, The 5 Love Languages. And I started to wonder if we might not be able to create a construct for anxiety languages. And that's what I've done. So I've brought together here some ideas. Now, this is a work in progress. I'm not saying that I'm publishing a book. Maybe down the road I will, but this isn't ready for prime time yet. But I want to hear your feedback and your thoughts on what I think could be a new way to understand anxiety. And it's going to be through this lens of the 5 anxiety languages. All right, I hope this blesses you. Let me know what you think. God bless.
I spent the last 10 years learning how to help people using the best techniques available in psychology integrated with the Catholic faith. Now we've figured out that there's a better way to help people than just slapping a Catholic label on the same secular model of therapy you find anywhere else. The real question is, how will we make this shift to a new model of truly Catholic accompaniment, keeping the psychological sciences in mind while opening up to a more human and more effective approach? This podcast is here to give you the answer. Join me and follow along as I take you behind the scenes of what this new model looks like, using recorded audio from sessions working with my team, with colleagues, and even directly with clients. My name is Dr. Greg Bottaro, and I want to welcome you to the Being Human podcast.
All right, so here we are. We're going to talk about anxiety languages and how I've put this together and what this might look like. Remember, in the love languages, we have, this idea of love, but then, like, what does that really mean? When you say I love you to somebody and they don't speak your language, your love language, they don't really feel loved. Well, when we have clients that we might have said in the past, sounds like you might have an anxiety issue here. They might say, what are you talking about? I don't have anxiety. Because we have a conceptualization of anxiety that's really just like one kind of thing. And maybe your picture of anxiety is somebody who's like frazzled and razzled, and their hair is kind of a mess and they're ruminating constantly, or somebody who's really obsessive and in their thinking and ruminating all the time. And yes, of course, that's going to be one kind of anxiety. But is that really the only kind of anxiety? That's what we want to look at here. So let me give you the simple construct of my 5 anxiety languages, and then we can break those open a little bit more. And by the way, I'm also working on a quiz. So just like you could take the 5 love languages quiz, I'm going to have a 5 anxiety languages quiz so that you can figure out what's your predominant language. And I'm sure as I'm describing these categories, you're already going to have probably a sense of what yours might be. I don't know about you, but I've taken that love languages quiz and I'm like, I like all this. Who doesn't want gifts? Who doesn't want more words of affirmation? Who doesn't want more quality time? But if you really dial in and really sort of parse it out with these quizzes, you realize, oh yeah, I do have a predominant one, and there is going to be a more natural way that I think about and feel and experience the concept. Same with anxiety. And so if we open this up and you can see what your particular flavor of anxiety is, all the other language that you hear and all the other resources that are available are going to hit so much deeper. We built this for a way to help people open up even more within the Catholic Mindfulness virtual retreat. And when we do Catholic Mindfulness, we talk about anxiety, anxiety, anxiety. Well, this is going to be how you can actually realize that it can help you in this particular area, whatever your particular category is. So the 5 categories, the 5 languages, 5 anxiety love languages. Okay, there's going to be 5 types. The first type is reactive. The second one is activated. The third one is going to be minimizing. So reactive, activated, minimizing. And oh, by the way, this is also why when Jesus says, do not be anxious about the things of your life, I think that there's a really deep dive that we can do here. Because he's talking about going into these particular mannerisms of acting. If we realize that we can stop being anxious in our life, we're supposed to. He told us to. And if he told us to do it, it means it's possible. Well, that means that we're going to be able to stop whatever your particular flavor or language of speaking anxiety is. So if it's being reactive, if it's being activated, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, or if it means minimizing, or the other 2, so here's the 4th, is withdrawing. And then the 5th one, impulsivity, being impulsive. Okay, so there's the 5 anxiety languages: reactive, activated, minimizing, withdrawing, and impulsive. And by the way, if you're having trouble holding on to that in your mind right now, if you forget one as you're trying to think through what are those 5 again, only until recently, I still actually forget some of the love languages. And I always have to, was it like gift giving, acts of service? There's always like one that I forget. So we got to work on this a little bit. And this, like I said, work in progress here, folks. So, if your feedback is really helpful, if there's a different word that you think hits the flavor of the language a little bit better, let me know. I'd love to hear what your ideas and thoughts are on this. And if you feel like it's very clear which one is your language. Okay, so reactive. Now, the reactive anxiety language is for people who are really snappy, like really short-tempered. And, people think like, oh, and it's easy to over-spiritualize these things. And we say like, oh, somebody is just uncharitable. Somebody's impatient. Yes, we can take one construct, one way of thinking about things, one lens, and we can overlap it or overlay it on what we're talking about here. And yeah, of course, we could say if somebody is being reactive, even though psychologically we can say that that's coming from certain anxiety, and then, and I open up even more to talking about the parts. We talk about parts theory, all of that. So we have reactive parts, and ultimately we're all going to have all 5 languages, just like the love languages. We have all 5 anxiety languages, but each of us in our personalities have them in different strengths, because certain parts that we've developed over time are sort of more of our MO, our manager parts that are more normally in daily operation. So somebody might be really reactive all the time, and that's kind of their personality. And one thing that we differentiate, especially at the Catholic Psych Institute, when we talk about personality, these things are changeable. That's why I don't like identifying by personality. when we say like, what's your personality type, quote unquote? Well, let's be careful with that, because these things are changeable. If you're a reactive person and you're really on edge, really keyed up, wound up a lot, that's actually a kind of anxiety. And the Catholic mindfulness, sitting in the present moment, opening up to the present moment, learning how to turn towards the parts that are actually in there, in our head, in our mind, in our soul. We can sit with and turn towards and understand more with compassion, and that's actually going to bring down reactivity. We're going to become less snappy at people, less keyed up, less on edge. All right, the second one is activated. Activated actually, oh, by the way, all of the parts, and this is basic parts theory, can be repurposed. So if you have a part that's reactive and keyed up and on edge, well, you could also call that alertness. And that part of you, once you sort of let it off the hook for its protective job that it's doing for you, actually becomes a really important part of staying alert. Even in the spiritual life, what do we read? In night prayer, stay sober and alert. The enemy is prowling. It's like eyes wide open, looking around. Should we be looking around at threats that are just perceived and not real? No, that's when we have to inform, educate, evangelize these internal parts, let them off the hook. But then the part of us that was operating in that way can be repurposed, and we should be alert. We should be sober and awake to the enemy that might be prowling like a lion. But well, let me move on to the next one. Activated means that we are just ready to go, super motivated. Super motivated, ready to tackle the task, ready to get after it. And a lot of times people find that maybe they're go, 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 go all the time. So this is a little bit more nuanced. Sometimes it's more difficult to see that this is a defensive reaction. It's more difficult to see that this is actually coming from anxiety. But you start to notice it after a while when you realize this person can't turn it off. It's always on. It's just always go time. If you can't take a step back, if you can't take a breath, if you don't know how to put vacation into your schedule, if you don't know how to put silence and meditative prayer into your schedule, because you're just go, 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 go all the time until you crash out, and maybe rest for you is just being exhausted, this is your anxiety. This is an anxiety language, and Catholic mindfulness is going to help you with this. And so we want to see there, it's a little easier to see, like, once that part gets unhinged from the need for protection because you're running away from some inner voice that's nagging you or bothering you. You're going to be a failure if you don't get this done. If you don't do this enough, you're going to fail, and then you're going to be rejected, isolated, lonely. All these other voices that are going on inside. This is what we help people with in mentorship. By the way, it takes help to listen to these inner voices. I was just in prayer this morning. It takes years to do this on your own. I heard voices in me, like some of my own inner thinking. I just discovered a new one this morning after decades of doing this work and spending time with other people, therapists, mentors. We need help. It's a lot easier to hear what's going on inside of us and discover what's underneath these languages of anxiety when we have help, when people are walking with us. So activated is go, go, go. If it gets repurposed, it becomes motivation. It becomes, obviously efficiency. It is good to go, 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 and then be able to also mindfully be aware of when to turn it off. All right, so the third one that I said was minimizing. Now, minimizing is also, it's a good anxiety when it's used appropriately. So this is when people are kind of like, this is fine. I've got a massive minimizing anxiety part. And In fact, a lot of people in my team at Catholic Psych will use this meme. I'm sure you've seen it before. There's this cartoon dog sitting on a chair in the middle of a burning room. He's got his coffee, and he's just sitting there drinking his coffee. Flames all around him. Everything is burning down around him, and he's just sitting there sipping his coffee, and it just says, "This is fine." Well, that's me in a nutshell. Like, when things start to hit the fan, for the most part, then, I have this, like, sort of calm, cool, collected. Well, that's great sometimes. And it's also great as long as it doesn't come at the cost of repressing how scary or how difficult or chaotic some of these things in life might feel. You see, if something's really not going well, that's okay. Things don't go well sometimes. But if we've built a narrative, like for me, I kind of over-spiritualize it sometimes, where it's like, yeah, nothing's going well, but I know God's got this under control. Now, on one hand, that's 100% true. You can't argue with that point. On the other hand, I internally might be ignoring, repressing, not acknowledging the parts of me that are freaking out, like flipping out, because part of me naturally and understandably is not going to be fine. Now, if I listen to those parts of me and I process them and I let them live and I let them breathe and I accept the fact that I've got like good parts of me that are aware of when there's a problem, and then I also process all of that and integrate and become more holistic in my parts working together, and then I have this self-led clarity that God's got it under control. Raise your glass. Drink your coffee. This is fine. No problem. God's got this. Okay, within reason. I can promise you I don't do that perfectly. I think that's a pretty hard goal. We all have to have daily reflection coming back to how are we seeing all of the parts that are inside of us. But the "this is fine" part is a minimizing language of anxiety. All right, the fourth one is withdrawing. Now, this one also is really hard to see as anxiety. But when some people have parts that are perceiving threats, which is underlying all these languages, it's perceived threat. That's why the Catholic mindfulness program works for all the languages of anxiety, because it's based on the basic sympathetic nervous response, basic brain science. Despite a few people out in the world having some Catholic concern over being New Age, there's nothing New Age about brain science. It's literally just what's happening in your brain. You can measure it on a screen, and you can see the sympathetic nervous response turns on when you have a perceived threat, and you can turn it off. You have a manual override switch by training yourself to know how to pay attention to the present moment. Shocking? Not really. It's actually pretty reasonable that it fits perfectly with Catholic spirituality. That's abandonment to divine providence, the practice of the presence of God, the sacrament of the present moment. That's what Catholic mindfulness is. And when we turn towards the present moment, we turn off that sympathetic nervous response. Some people's nervous response, sympathetic nervous response, and again, not nervous because like you're anxious, but nervous meaning the nervous system. So this is brain science. It causes them to withdraw. So I'm recording this on video, and I just saw balloons going up in the air. Now, it triggered a little anxiety in me. And so now I'm thinking I need to turn off the recording. But I think I'm going to keep this in the episode, because even just in that moment, as soon as I saw balloons coming up on the screen from the automated recording feature or whatever that's part of the computer, I felt my heart jump. That's a sympathetic nervous response. And it could trigger my brain to start processing a fight or flight. Okay, do I have to turn off the camera? Do I have to reset? And it causes me to, I have a part of me that wants me to turn off and withdraw. But instead, what can I do? I can let this be part of the process. All of a sudden, this is a literal, real life, present moment, teachable moment that you get to benefit from. And instead of me withdrawing, I'm talking about it. I'm giving voice to what's happening in the moment. That's the opposite of withdrawing. So I can counteract what that anxiety language is trying to do in me. And it's not my biggest part. It's not my anxiety language. I felt it in me. Like I said, we all have all 5. But some of ours are louder than others. And my loudest is probably that activated go, go, go part. And so also along with the minimizing part. So part of me is saying this is fine. Part of me is saying, let's do this. We're going to use this. We're going to make this part of the video. We're going to make this part of the podcast. And if you, by the way, if you want to watch the podcast on video, if you don't know, we publish these on YouTube. So if you listen to this normally on a podcast player, you can also come check out the video on YouTube. You'll see the balloons going up. And so this is how we can work with the parts. They're not bad. It's not bad to have the withdrawing part. Sometimes, and again, if we let it off the hook, unhinge it from its protective role, then we learn sometimes it's good. Take a step back. Evaluate first. Let ourselves sort of rest. Look around. Be observant. That's a good way to sort of work with the activated part that's always go, go, go. Instead, we could take that step back and let the observant part that's on alert come out. And again, not being reactive, but being alert. And then we can sort of take a sort of survey of the landscape, figure out what's going on. We need to pull back, or in other words, healthily withdraw for a bit to do that. All right, last one, number 5. Impulsive. All right, impulsive. Now, this is like the ADHD people. There's a lot of anxiety that underlines ADHD. Now, ADHD is obviously an organic, biochemical, real thing. However, it overlaps a lot. And a lot of times we find that people with trauma express trauma in ways that look like ADHD. And of course, both might coexist. So there's an overlap. But it's interesting to see that anxiety is what's coming from the trauma. And anxiety might lead to this sort of hyperactivity, this impulsivity. And it's like somebody who's dealing with a lot of stuff very deep down, all of a sudden, they're going to clean this room. They're going to reorganize this closet. They're going to build this new thing. They're going to go, change the oil on 3 cars in a day. They're going to go boom, 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 all over the place. And it's like, I don't know how to say no to anything. I'm just from this thing to that thing. I'm over to this thing. And also, those things probably never even get finished. So next thing you know, the closet is only half organized and half all over your living room. And the car is now not drivable. And you didn't finish cleaning the bathroom. All of these things are happening because they are these not reactive, but I should use the right language. They are this impulsivity that's coming up as a reaction to a deeper layer of parts that are feeling anxious about different things. Should we have that part still once we have unhinged it from its protective role? 100% absolutely. And what does that look like? It looks like spontaneity. It looks like the creativity that opens up within the human spirit, especially when we're open to the Holy Spirit. When God is working within us, things are happening in ways that we did not anticipate. We don't need to have planning about every step of the way. Sometimes we need to just be able to roll with the punches. That's how we can actually live in the Spirit, with the Spirit, through the Spirit, that God is working through us, in us, and with us. And when we see that way in the world, it's almost like we have the capacity to step outside of what's happening in the here and now and transcend to that eternal realm of where God is always present. And then with God's Spirit injected into the here and now, it's like the here and now is all we need. Think about what a beautiful redemption of impulsivity that is. Anxious impulsivity. Transformed, it becomes Spirit-led creative spontaneity. And that's how we bring all these pieces together. So, We'll review really quickly. We have reactive, we have activated, we have minimizing, we have withdrawing, and we have impulsivity. All right, so that's what I got for this new up-and-coming project we're working on. It's a work in progress. Please let me know what you think, and if there's anything you would change, if there's anything that you think is really insightful to keep. Also, by the way, all these resources that I've talked about are in the show notes. So go to the podcast page. You go to CatholicPsych.com/beinghuman. You can find it there right on the page. And we have mentorship available. We have the Catholic mindfulness program in a virtual retreat available. Daily videos that come to you for 8 weeks that will help you actually unpack what all of this looks like. God bless you.
Thanks for listening to the Being Human podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to help us spread the word and hear more, please head over to iTunes, leave us a review, and subscribe, as it really helps us to get our content out to more people. Be sure to listen next time as I take you deeper into what it means to be human. If you want more free content and information about what we do at the Catholic Psych Institute, head on over to CatholicPsych.com. God bless you.